Imagine holding a piece of American history in the palm of your hand, a simple quarter that to most people is nothing more than 25 cents, but to collectors, historians, and coin enthusiasts alike, the 1982 Washington quarter tells a much deeper story. It is a coin that sits at the crossroads of major economic changes, minting transitions, and collecting challenges. And once you peel back the surface, you will realize that this particular year carries secrets that make it stand out. Among modern U.S. coinage, to understand the 1982 Washington quarter, we must step back and look at the broader picture of American coinage history and the role the quarter has played since its first introduction in 1932, the year that marked the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The quarter was chosen as the denomination to honor the first president of the United States, replacing the standing Liberty quarter, which had served from 1916 to 1930. The design by sculptor John Flanagan placed Washington's bust on the obverse with the word Liberty above and the date below, while the reverse carried the majestic heraldic eagle, clutching arrows and olive branches symbolizing strength and peace. This design would remain largely unchanged for decades, creating one of the most familiar images in American pockets, purses, and cash registers. By the time we reached the year 1982, the United States was going through a period of intense economic transition, inflation challenges rising. Deficits and shifts in fiscal policies under President Ronald Reagan had put pressure on the mint to reduce costs and make production more efficient. For decades, coins had been minted not only for circulation, but also in special, uncirculated, and proof sets for collectors. However, in 1982, the mint made a pivotal decision that would forever affect the desirability and rarity of that year's quarters. It was the first year since 1964 that the mint did not issue traditional mint sets. This meant that collectors had no official uncirculated 1982 Washington quarters directly available in sets, making high-quality specimens difficult to obtain. Today, the 1982 Washington quarter was struck in two major locations, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark, while the Denver mint coins were marked with the familiar D. The San Francisco Mint continued its role in striking proofs, but because no standard mint sets were issued, the circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver became the primary source for collectors seeking examples in uncirculated condition. This scarcity in pristine form is what makes the 1982 quarter so fascinating and so heavily pursued by numismatists. Another detail that deepens the story of the 1982 quarter is the composition and the broader context of clad coinage. After the United States ended silver coinage for circulation in 1965, quarters were struck in a copper-nickel clad composition with a pure copper core sandwiched between two outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. This remained the case in 1982, but the quality of planchets and the minting process of that era sometimes led to weak strikes and coins with inconsistent details, making sharply struck. 1982. Washington quarters. A true prize to find in high grade. Adding even more intrigue are the varieties known for this year. Among them, the most famous is the 1982 Washington quarter, struck on a planchet meant for a dime, resulting in an undersized coin that collectors value highly. Error coins like these often escape the mint unnoticed and find their way into circulation where sharp-eyed collectors decades later discover them. There are also double-die obverse varieties where lettering or numbers appear doubled, adding another layer of collectability to the 1982 quarter. When discussing the 1982 Washington quarter, it is also essential to explore the cultural and economic environment of the time as it shapes the story of why these coins matter. In the early 1980s, the U.S. economy was facing a severe recession. Unemployment was high, interest rates had soared, and inflation remained a constant threat. Coins like the 1982 quarter circulated in a nation that was tightening belts and adjusting to a new political era, where fiscal conservatism and economic reform were hot topics. As everyday Americans used these coins to buy gasoline, groceries, or newspapers, they became tiny markers of a challenging but transformative time in the nation's history. For collectors today, the 1982 Washington quarter stands as a reminder of how small changes in minting policy can ripple across decades. The decision not to produce mint sets in that year has made gem-quality quarters extremely difficult to source while circulated examples are plentiful. Finding a 1982 quarter-graded MS-65 or higher can be a real challenge, and such pieces command significant premiums in the numismatic marketplace. Similarly, proofs from San Francisco are more accessible, but circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver are where the rarity truly lies. Over the course of 2 hours, we could dive deeper into the production numbers, with Philadelphia striking over 500 million coins and Denver producing similar massive quantities. Yet despite these high mintages, the lack of preserved, uncirculated examples means the true collector population remains limited. We can explore the stories of individuals who found rare errors in pocket change, or inherited rolls of 1982 quarters only to realize years later that they had been sitting on coins worth far more than face value. We can discuss the grading process, how services like PCGS and NGC evaluate the sharpness of the strike, the luster of the coin, the preservation of surfaces, and how these elements determine whether a 1982 quarter is a common piece of pocket change or a rare and valuable treasure. We can also trace the Washington quarter's journey beyond 1982, leading into the later 1990s, when the design would finally change with the introduction of the 50-state quarters program. This makes the 1982 coin one of the later classic-era Washington quarters before the explosion of interest and popularity that came with statehood. Designs, by looking backward, we can appreciate how the 1982 quarter represents a bridge between tradition and transformation in American coinage. So when you hold a 1982 Washington quarter, remember that it is more than just a coin. It is a product of a year when the mint broke from tradition, when America was reshaping its economy, and when collectors unknowingly faced one of the most intriguing challenges in modern numismatics, hidden in plain sight among billions of coins, the 1982 Washington quarter continues to spark curiosity, passion, and discovery among those who recognize its deeper story, and as we explore it in depth, we uncover not just the history of a coin, but a reflection of America itself in that moment of time. Have you ever held a simple coin in your hand and wondered if it carries more than just face value? Wondered if behind its metallic shine lies a story that connects history, politics, economics, and art together? The 1973 Washington quarter is one such coin, a piece of American currency that on the surface looks ordinary, yet beneath its ordinary appearance, it holds a history tied to monumental shifts in the nation's monetary system. The Washington quarter itself was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the birth of George Washington, the first president of the United States. The design chosen for the coin was created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose profile bust of Washington would go on to become one of the most recognizable coin portraits in American history over the years from 1932 up to 1964. The Washington quarter was struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, giving it intrinsic value far beyond its face value, however. The mid-1960s marked a massive turning point in the story of the American quarter. The United States faced a nationwide coin shortage caused by rising silver prices and hoarding by the public. In response, the government passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from circulating dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars beginning in 1965. Washington quarters were no longer made from silver but from a clad composition of copper and nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change forever altered the collecting and economic nature of the quarter, making it essentially a fiat coin tied solely to its spending value and not to the worth of precious metal by 1973. This transition had become firmly established, yet the quarter still remained one of the most widely used coins in American commerce. The 1973 Washington quarter carries the same design details that Flanagan originally created decades earlier. The obverse features the bust of George Washington facing left with the word liberty inscribed above his head, and the motto, "In God We Trust," placed to the left of his neck. The date 1973 appears directly below Washington's bust, reminding collectors and historians of the exact era when this coin was minted. The reverse side of the quarter displays the majestic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a bundle of arrows symbolizing defense. While an olive branch beneath represents peace, above the eagle appear the words, United States of America, and directly below the denomination quarter dollar. What makes the 1973 Washington quarter particularly fascinating is its placement within the broader context of American coinage in the 1970s. The early part of the decade was marked by major financial challenges, including inflation and changes in currency policy, as the United States moved fully away from the gold standard under President Richard Nixon. In 1971, the dollar was no longer backed by precious metals, meaning that coins like the quarter became purely fiduciary instruments, supported entirely by government authority and public trust. Thus, the 1973 quarter represents a snapshot of America in transition, a country redefining the meaning of its money in terms of production. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were the main facilities striking circulation quarters in 1973. Philadelphia produced coins without a mint mark, while Denver coins carried the D-mint mark placed to the right of Washington's ponytail ribbon. These circulation strikes were produced in the hundreds of millions, reflecting the massive demand for quarters in commerce at the time. Additionally, the San Francisco Mint produced special proof coins for collectors. These proof coins carried the S-Mint mark and were struck with polished dies and planchets, giving them a mirrored finish that stood in stark contrast to the matte appearance of regular business strike coins. Collectors often look at the 1973 Washington quarter, not for its metallic content since it contains no silver, but for its historical placement within the numismatic timeline. Coins of this year may be found in relatively high grades, given the large numbers minted and the relatively recent nature of their production. However, coins preserved in mint state condition, especially those graded by professional services, can hold added value, while proof specimens from San Francisco often display exceptional quality and sharp details that attract numismatists. Another layer of interest in the 1973 quarter involves error coins. As with all coinage, certain production mistakes slip through the minting process and reach circulation. These errors can include off-center strikes, double dies planche, flaws, and clipped planches. Collectors have found 1973 quarters with striking errors that increase their desirability and value far beyond face value. Some error coins can be worth hundreds of dollars, depending on rarity and demand from a cultural perspective. The Washington quarter of 1973 also represents continuity in American symbolism throughout times of political and economic upheaval. The portrait of George Washington stood as a steady reminder of national identity, while the eagle on the reverse carried the message of strength and peace. The American public trusted this coin to function in their daily lives during a decade of uncertainty, from the Watergate scandal to the energy crisis and rising inflation. The story of the 1973 Washington quarter is not merely the story of a coin. It is the story of a nation, a reflection of its values, its struggles, and its resilience. When you hold this coin, you hold a piece of history that has passed through countless hands over the past half-century. It may have paid for a gallon of gas in the early 70s or helped a child buy candy at the corner store. It may have been dropped into a payphone during an emergency or slipped into a jukebox to play a favorite song. Every mark and scratch on a circulated 1973 quarter carries silent testimony to the lives it has touched. For collectors today, the 1973 quarter remains a common but meaningful piece. It is not rare in the way early silver quarters are, yet it represents the closing years of the classic Washington quarter design, before major modifications and commemorative series arrived in later decades in 1975 and 1976. For For example, the United States would temporarily replace the Washington reverse design with the bicentennial drummer boy and torch-bearing design, celebrating 200 years of American independence. This means that the 1973 quarter was one of the last in the uninterrupted sequence of the Eagle reverse quarters before the bicentennial. Celebration interrupted the pattern. In professional numismatics, the 1973 quarter is studied not for rarity, but for condition. Collectors seek specimens with sharp strikes, full details, and minimal bag marks. Gem mint state examples graded MS65 or higher can be attractive to advanced collectors, while proofs with cameo or deep cameo contrast are especially prized. To fully appreciate the 1973 Washington quarter, one must understand the broader history of American coinage and the forces that shaped it, from the elimination of silver in 1965 to the economic policies of the Nixon administration and the social changes of the 70s. Each quarter minted in 1973 stands as a witness to history and continues to circulate today, reminding us that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories. In a world where every coin tells a story and every piece of metal whispers the forgotten chapters of American history, the 1983 Washington quarter stands as one of the most intriguing, mysterious, and unexpectedly valuable coins ever created by the United States Mint, a coin born in a year of economic turbulence, minting challenges, metal shortages, and national change. A year that transformed an ordinary quarter into a legendary collectible that still fascinates numismatists, treasure hunters, and history lovers across the nation. And today we dive deep into the journey of this iconic 1983 quarter, exploring its origin, its purpose, its production struggles, its striking anomalies, and the surprising reasons why this single 25-cent piece can command massive attention in the world of rare coins. And as we travel back through the decades, you will see how a simple quarter minted for everyday use became a symbol of American craftsmanship, resilience, and unexpected rarity, and how even today, collectors are willing to pay high premiums for pristine examples full of sharp detail, bold strikes, and unique mint characteristics. A coin that should have been common, yet became scarce, a coin that should have blended into circulation, yet stood out as a shining chapter in American minting history. And our journey begins in the early months of 1983, when the United States Mint was still recovering from the economic pressures of the late 1970s and early 1980s, a time defined by inflation, rising metal prices, and nationwide budget adjustments, leading to strategic changes in coin production. And in that environment, the Washington quarter continued its long-standing legacy, a design first introduced in 1932, honoring the 200th birthday of President George Washington, and sculpted by John Flanagan, whose portrait of Washington would remain one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. The 1983 quarter was meant to be just another continuation of that tradition, yet hidden within the year were unusual circumstances that would elevate the coin far beyond its intended purpose. And one of the main reasons for the unexpected importance of the 1983 quarter was the absence of official mint sets for that year, a result of financial constraints and policy choices that disrupted collectors who relied on these sets to obtain high-grade coins directly from the mint. Without mint sets, the supply of high-quality 1983 coins in the hands of collectors dropped dramatically, forcing collectors to obtain their coins from circulation, where they quickly suffered wear, scratches, and damage, making mint state 1983 quarters, especially from the Philadelphia Mint, significantly harder to find than surrounding years. And as the mint battled production pressure, shortages in die preparation, and heavy demand for circulating coinage, many 1983 quarters were struck with weak details, flat hairlines, soft eagles, and uneven surfaces, creating a year full of challenges that directly influenced the rarity of high-grade survivors. And as the coins entered circulation, they became part of a nation transitioning into New cultural movements, new technology, new economy, and new financial expectations, and the 1983 quarter moved through daily transactions, gas stations, grocery stores, bus fares, lunch counters, each one slowly forming its own marks and story until only a handful would remain untouched enough to qualify as exceptional collector pieces decades later. And among the most famous and sought-after varieties of this year stands the legendary 1983 P quarter with the dramatic die break known by collectors as the Spitting Eagle error, caused by a die crack extending from the eagle's mouth downward, creating the appearance of a projectile and transforming a simple minting flaw into one of the most famous error coins of the 1980s. And as collectors discovered this variety, excitement surged through the numismatic community, bringing even more attention to the 1983 quarter and elevating its status beyond a simple circulation coin. And as time passed and most examples disappeared into pockets, drawers, vending machines, and coin counters, the remaining high-grade coins began commanding strong prices, especially those certified in MS-65, MS-66, and above, quickly becoming key coins for anyone building a complete modern quarter set. And today, the 1983 quarter stands not just as a piece of money, but as a living artifact of American minting history. A reminder of how economic conditions, production decisions, metal supply challenges, and human craftsmanship can combine to create unexpected rarity and lasting collector value. And as you explore the coin, its history, and its varieties, you begin to understand why this single year remains one of the most studied, discussed, and desired issues in the entire Washington Quarter series. A coin that proves that rarity is not always planned. Value is not always predictable, and history is sometimes hidden in the smallest details of a simple silver-colored coin passed from hand to hand across the nation. And this is the story of the 1983 Washington Quarter, a story that continues to grow as more collectors search for high-grade examples, rare errors, and untouched treasures still waiting to be discovered in the wild, and it remains a powerful reminder that in the world of coins, history is everywhere, even in the pocket change of an ordinary American morning. As the journey of the 1983 Washington Quarter continues, we move deeper into the environment that shaped this unique coin, a time when the United States Mint was navigating not only economic limitations, but also the challenges of aging equipment, evolving minting techniques, and enormous public circulation demands. And while the quarter was already a fundamental part of American commerce, the year 1983 pushed the design to its limits, revealing the strengths and the weaknesses of the minting process in extraordinary ways. And to understand the true importance of this quarter, we must step inside the minting facilities themselves, beginning with Philadelphia, where millions of 1983 P quarters were produced. Yet despite the large numbers, the scarcity of well-struck, high-grade examples continues to astonish collectors because the Philadelphia Mint rushed production schedules and reused dies far beyond their ideal lifespan, resulting in significant wear on the dies, creating coins that show soft details, worn lettering, flat drapery on Washington's portrait, and an eagle with reduced feather clarity. And because these weak strikes circulated heavily, finding one today with full luster sharp hairlines, strong rims, and crisp eagle feathers is a challenge that pushes the value of certified high-grade coins into premium territory. And as we shift our focus to the Denver Mint, we uncover another layer of the story, where the 1983 D quarter faced its own distinct obstacles, including die fatigue, misaligned strikes, and inconsistent metal flow. Yet even with these complications, the Denver issues generally display somewhat stronger details than their Philadelphia counterparts, though still affected by heavy circulation, which makes high mint state survivors equally desirable. And as we explore the work of engravers and mint technicians, we discover that the original design created by John Flanagan in 1932 was never intended to endure such long-term use without periodic refinements, and by the early 1980s, the design had lost some of its original sharpness as decades of die hubs Have you ever held an ordinary coin in your hand and wondered if it carries with it a story that stretches far beyond its metallic shine, a story that ties into the very heart of American history, economics, and culture? The 1967 Washington Quarter may look like just another piece of pocket change, but in reality, it is a coin born in a turbulent decade, a coin that represents political shifts, economic challenges, and monumental changes in United States coinage policy. This is not just about 25 cents. It is about the struggle between tradition and innovation, about the evolution of America's money supply, and about a turning point when the nation abandoned silver coinage and entered a new era of clad coin production. To understand the 1967 quarter, we first need to go back to the origins of the Washington Quarter series. In 1932, the United States sought to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. After long debate, the Treasury chose a design by sculptor John Flanagan, based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's classical bust of Washington created in 1785. Flanagan's portrait was adopted, and it would remain the face of the quarter for decades to come, with only minor adjustments. The obverse displayed the commanding image of Washington with the word "Liberty" above the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the year of issue below on the reverse. The bold American eagle perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches symbolized strength and peace. For over 30 years, this design remained unchanged, and the Washington Quarter became one of the most familiar coins in circulation across the United States by the 1960s. However, America's coinage faced a crisis. Rising silver prices threatened the nation's supply of circulating coins. From the dime to the half-dollar, the value of silver was climbing to such levels that the intrinsic metal content of these coins approached and even exceeded their face value. Hoarding and melting became common practice, and by the mid-1960s, the United States Mint was faced with widespread shortages in coinage. Production lines could not keep up. Banks were left without enough coins, and the American public grew increasingly frustrated. The government responded decisively under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, one of the most significant pieces of monetary legislation in modern history. This act permanently removed silver from the dime and the quarter, replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition, while the half-dollar was reduced to 40% silver for a short time before silver was eliminated entirely. The decision was controversial. Collectors feared that coinage would lose its intrinsic value. Traditionalists resisted the end of silver, but practicality and necessity won the day, and the nation entered a new age of modern base metal coinage. The Washington Quarter of 1967, therefore, was not only a continuation of the series, but also a representation of these sweeping changes. Unlike quarters of earlier years, the 1967 issue contained no silver. It was struck in the clad composition of an outer layer of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This gave the coin its distinctive look and sound, different from the familiar silver coins of previous decades. The 1967 quarter also carried a unique distinction in its minting. Because of the coin shortage crisis, the Mint took unprecedented steps to discourage collecting and hoarding. For both 1965 and 1966, the government had ordered that no mint marks be placed on coins, and this policy continued through 1967. Therefore, every quarter of this year lacks a mint mark, regardless of whether it was produced at Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. The reasoning was simple. Officials feared that collectors searching for coins from specific mints would remove too many pieces from circulation, worsening the shortage by eliminating mint marks. The Mint hoped to ensure that all coins would circulate freely. Production numbers for the 1967 Washington Quarter were massive as the Mint struggled to meet demand. Millions upon millions were struck and pushed into circulation. The Philadelphia Mint and its branches ran full capacity. With the goal of stabilizing the supply in the nation's banking system, these coins quickly spread across the country, filling cash registers and wallets and slowly easing the crisis, though the shortage remained a memory for years to come. Beyond Its production numbers the 1967 quarter holds deeper significance. Numismatists recognize it as part of a 3-year period known as the no-mint mark era from 1965 through 1967, after which mint marks returned in 1968 with coins struck at Denver, and San Francisco once again identified by their small marks on the obverse. The 1967 issue therefore stands as a piece of evidence of the Mint's experimental policies and its attempts to control the behavior of collectors. It is also noteworthy for the fact that during this period the government suspended the release of proof sets and mint sets, which had been popular with collectors. Instead, they offered what was called special mint sets, or SMS. These sets contained coins of higher quality than circulation strikes but not quite proofs. The 1967 SMS quarter is highly regarded today for its sharp details, smoother surfaces, and better eye appeal compared to business strikes. For collectors, the 1967 quarter represents a fascinating era. In American coinage history, while most circulation strikes are common and easily obtainable, the SMS versions in high grade can command significant interest. Condition plays a crucial role as always in numismatics. Most 1967 quarters in circulation are heavily worn, but finding examples with full details, lustrous surfaces, and minimal contact marks makes them prized additions to a collection. Grading agencies such as PCGS and NGC evaluate these coins carefully, and those in the highest grades of mint state can fetch strong premiums, though the average worn example remains worth only its face value of 25 cents. The 1967 quarter also invites broader reflection on the role of coinage in society. It marked the definitive end of an era when American coinage contained silver for generations. Citizens had trusted in the intrinsic value of their coins, but from 1965 onward, the nation transitioned fully to fiduciary coinage coins, whose worth depended not on metal content, but on government guarantee. In this sense, the 1967 quarter stands as a symbol of modernization and adaptation. It was practical, lightweight, durable, and able to be produced in enormous quantities to satisfy a growing economy. Yet for many, it carried with it nostalgia for the silver coins of the past, and a recognition that the world of money had changed forever. As we dive deeper into the story of this coin, we uncover how it reflects not only monetary policy, but also the broader history of the United States in the 1960s, a time of social upheaval, war, abroad civil rights struggles, and rapid economic change. The Washington quarter remained a constant presence in the lives of ordinary Americans, jingling in pockets lining vending machines and fueling commerce. It may have seemed like just another coin, but beneath its surface lay the entire weight of a nation adapting to change. So when you hold a 1967 Washington quarter in your hand, you are not merely looking at 25 cents. You are looking at a piece of a story that bridges the old and the new, a story that links the silver age of American coinage to the clad era that continues to this day. It is a coin that teaches us how money is never static, but evolves with the needs of society, technology, and economy. And for the collector, historian, or casual enthusiast, the 1967 Washington quarter remains one. What if I told you that a small, everyday coin from 1989 carries the weight of America's history from its very origins to the dawn of a new era at the close of the 20th century? What if I told you that the Washington quarter of 1989 is not just a piece of change, but a mirror into the country's economy, its minting technology, its artistry, its politics, and even its culture? This is the story of a coin that may seem ordinary, yet reveals extraordinary details when we peel back its layers. The Washington Quarter series began in 1932 as part of the bicentennial celebration of George Washington's birth, and the design selected for the quarter was created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose vision of Washington was based on the bust created by Jean-Antoine Houdon in 1785. The obverse, or front of the coin, depicted Washington in profile with the word liberty placed above his head. The phrase, "In God we trust," positioned just to the left of his chin, and the date of minting. Displayed beneath his portrait, the reverse of the coin carried a majestic bald eagle with outstretched wings, clutching arrows of strength and olive branches of peace, symbolizing the balance between America's readiness for defense and its desire. For peace, this design remained unchanged for decades, making the Washington Quarter one of the most recognizable coins in U.S. circulation. By 1989, the Washington Quarter was already in its 57th year of production, and during this time the coin had survived shifts in metal composition, changes in minting technology, and fluctuations in the American economy. The year 1989 marked a period when the United States was on the edge of major political and economic transformation. It was the final year of the 1980s, a decade defined by rapid technological innovation, the Cold War nearing its end, and the rise of a stronger consumer economy. Coins produced in this year carry within them the context of those times. The composition of the 1989 Washington Quarter followed the standard set after 1965, when the United States Mint officially abandoned the use of 90% silver in favor of a copper nickel-clad planchet due to rising silver prices and the strain it placed on circulating coinage. The clad composition featured an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This ensured durability, affordability, and widespread production, making the quarter a coin of resilience and practicality. By 1989, the clad composition was firmly established, and the Washington Quarter had become a workhorse of American currency found in every pocket, purse, cash register, and vending machine across the nation. When we examine the minting process of the 1989 quarter, we see that it was produced at multiple mints, including the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each mint produced quarters with slight variations, though the design remained the same. Coins from Philadelphia carried no mint mark, while those from Denver bore a D, and San Francisco issues carried an S and were struck primarily for proof sets. The proof quarters from San Francisco were made with sharp detail mirror-like fields and frosted devices, creating a contrast that made them stand out as highly collectible pieces. The Philadelphia Mint in 1989 produced hundreds of millions of quarters struck for general circulation. These coins were workhorses of the economy, and though many survive in well-worn condition, truly pristine, uncirculated examples remain desirable among collectors. The Denver Mint also struck vast numbers of circulation coins, and like the Philadelphia issues, their sheer volume made them common in average condition but scarce in high mint state grades. The San Francisco proof quarters, on the other hand, were produced in controlled numbers and were not meant for circulation. Instead, they were packaged in proof sets, sold to collectors, and are treasured for their precision and beauty. The artistry of John Flanagan's design continued to shine through in 1989, despite being over half a century old. By this time, the design had become a symbol of American stability, yet some critics argued that the portrait had become outdated compared to more modern coinage designs. Nevertheless, its longevity spoke to its popularity and the reverence held for George Washington as the father of the nation. His image on the quarter had become more than just art. It had become an icon recognized instantly across the world. The 1989 Washington Quarter also tells the story of errors, varieties, and minting oddities. As with many years, collectors have discovered doubled dies off-center, strikes, clipped planchets, and other minting mistakes that make certain coins far more valuable than their face value. These errors remind us that the minting process, though highly industrialized, was not immune to human error and mechanical flaws. Such coins are eagerly sought after by numismatists who treasure their rarity and uniqueness. Beyond its physical characteristics, the 1989 quarter also reflects the economy of the late 1980s. The United States was experiencing a period of relative economic growth. Unemployment was down, inflation was under control, and consumer spending was strong. Coins were constantly circulating as commerce expanded, and the quarter was the coin of choice for vending machines, arcade games, payphones, and toll booths, its purchasing power. In 1989 was stronger than it is today, and holding one could buy more goods and services, making it a powerful and practical part of everyday life. Collectors who study the 1989 Washington quarter often note its position as part of a transitional decade. The 1980s represented the last full era before the statehood quarter program launched in 1999, which would completely change the face of the quarter and ignite widespread public interest in coin collecting. The 1989 issue sits in that transition space where the quarter still carried Flanagan's eagle reverse and represented continuity rather than change. To hold one today is to touch the last chapters of an era before the great wave of modern commemorative coinage began. In terms of grading and values, the 1989 Washington quarter in circulated condition is generally common and worth face value. However, in high mint state grades, especially MS-66 and higher examples from Philadelphia and Denver, become significantly more valuable due to their relative scarcity in pristine condition. Proof examples from San Francisco, with deep cameo contrast, also attract strong collector interest, while mint errors from the year can command premium prices depending on their rarity and demand. To fully appreciate the 1989 Washington quarter, one must see it not just as a piece of currency, but as a document of history. It speaks to the endurance of a design that began in 1932. It reflects the economic realities of a nation in the late 1980s. It illustrates the capabilities and occasional flaws of minting technology. It carries the legacy of Washington as a timeless figure of leadership, and it stands on the threshold of a new era of American coinage as the country prepared to enter the 1990s and beyond. Every coin has a story, but the Washington quarter of 1989 carries a story that blends art history, economy, politics, and culture into a single object that fits in the palm of your hand. And when you trace its history, you discover far more than a coin. You uncover a chapter of America itself. Imagine holding a small piece of American history right in the palm of your hand, a coin that countless people spent without thought. A coin that bought groceries, paid for gas, passed through toll booths, and jingled in the pockets of workers, students, and families. Yet this simple coin, minted in 1984, carries with it an extraordinary story, a story that stretches from the birth of the Washington quarter in 1932 to the changes in America's economy, the artistry of its design, the minting technology of the 1980s, and the role it played in everyday American life. What if I told you that your 1984 Washington quarter is far more than just 25 cents? It is a symbol of tradition, resilience, and the ongoing legacy of the nation's first president. Today, we uncover the full, detailed history of the 1984 Washington quarter. The Washington quarter began its journey in 1932 when the United States decided to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The Treasury and the Commission of Fine Arts debated over the design, eventually selecting John Flanagan's portrait of Washington, which was based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's 1785 neoclassical bust. The obverse displayed Washington's profile with liberty above in God We Trust to the left, and the date of issue at the bottom. The reverse featured an eagle with outstretched wings, clutching arrows, symbolizing strength and vigilance, resting above olive branches to represent peace. This design remained largely unchanged for decades, becoming one of the most familiar circulating coins in the nation. By 1965, silver was removed from the quarter due to rising metal costs. The mint transitioned to a copper-nickel-clad composition with an inner core of pure copper and outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The 1984 Washington quarter belongs to this clad era, produced at three major mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia mint coins bore no mint mark. The Denver mint coins carried the D mint mark, and the San Francisco mint produced proof coins with the S mint mark for collectors. The year 1984 in the United States was marked by economic growth following the recession of the early 1980s. President Ronald Reagan was in office. The Summer Olympics were held in Los Angeles, and the country was experiencing a renewed sense of optimism. Coins like the 1984 quarter were part of everyday commerce. Reflecting this period of resurgence, they circulated widely through vending machines, payphones, arcades, and countless daily transactions, serving as both a tool of trade and a silent witness to history. The mintage numbers were significant. Philadelphia struck over 676 million quarters. Denver produced more than 546 million, and San Francisco created over 2 million proof coins. These enormous numbers meant the 1984 quarter was not rare in circulation, but collectors often search for specific varieties and minting errors which can increase a coin's value. Examples include off-center strikes, double, die obverses, weak strikes, filled mint marks, and coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations. Such errors are treasured because they are the result of the intricate and sometimes unpredictable process of high-speed coin production. The artistry of the 1984 quarter connects back to John Flanagan's original 1932 design, though critics often argued that the details were shallow compared to Laura Garden. Fraser's rejected design, Flanagan's portrait endured for decades, becoming iconic in its own right by 1984. The coin's design had been struck into the national consciousness so strongly that it was a defining part of American coinage. In fact, millions of Americans recognized Washington's profile on the quarter, even more readily than they recognized the portraits on dollar bills. The clad composition of the coin ensured durability. The copper-nickel surface resisted wear better than the softer silver coins of earlier decades, making the 1984 quarters able to withstand years of circulation without losing their legibility or detail. The reeded edge not only discouraged clipping or shaving, but also gave the quarter a distinct tactile identity, making it instantly recognizable by touch alone in pockets and cash registers across the nation. Collectors often view the 1984 quarter as a representative piece rather than a key date. Yet its significance lies in the way it bridges the transition between earlier and later phases of American numismatics. It stands at the threshold of modern coin collecting before the revolutionary state quarters program launched in 1999. The Washington quarter of 1984 preserves the classic eagle reverse, which would soon give way to designs representing each state. For those who lived through the 1980s, the eagle reverse quarter remains a nostalgic reminder of simpler times. The San Francisco proof quarters of 1984 stand apart in their mirrored fields and frosted devices crafted with polished dies and carefully handled planchets. They embody the highest standards of mint artistry and precision packaged for collectors. These coins were never meant for everyday circulation, yet they represent an important segment of American coinage, appealing to hobbyists who valued craftsmanship, presentation, and scarcity compared to the mass-produced business strikes. The economic role of the 1984 quarter was immense in a pre-digital world where cash dominated. Even small denominations had major significance. Vending machines often required quarters, arcades thrived on them, laundromats depended on them, and toll booths collected millions. Each day, the quarter was arguably the most versatile and useful coin in circulation, occupying a central place in American daily life far beyond its modest face value. Over time, the 1984 Washington quarter has gained appreciation among collectors, not because it is rare, but because it represents continuity. It tells the story of how a coin introduced in 1932 survived, changes in composition, economic upheavals, and artistic debates to remain firmly entrenched in American culture. Its value today depends on condition, mint mark, and whether it has unique errors. While circulated examples are generally worth their face value, uncirculated and proof specimens, especially those graded highly by professional services, can command a premium among enthusiasts. To hold a 1984 Washington quarter is to connect with the everyday life of mid-1980s America. It links us with the technology, the culture, the economy, and the artistic traditions of the time. It embodies the persistence of George Washington's image on coinage, the dedication of mint workers who struck hundreds of millions of coins with precision, and the ongoing narrative of American money which evolves, yet always looks back to its roots. The 1984 Washington quarter may seem like a common coin, but when studied deeply, it becomes an artifact that tells stories of design, politics, economics, and national identity.